As someone who follows the PVD podcast pretty close, I watched many other episodes. I was watching this heated debate that PVD and Douglas Murray had about the establishment and what is the establishment. And in my opinion, what is the difference between the mentality that PVD is having around this particular case versus the understanding from previous research that Douglas Murray brings to the table. So I'm gonna bring you here the clip. That way you guys can see the interaction. It does get kind of heated. They throw a couple of things at each other, and then I'll give you my take or what I think about this debate.
A lot of power. Sometimes a single member of parliament has a lot of power. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes the parliament doesn't have power. Sometimes, like in the age of social media has power and overtakes the power of politicians, and politicians have to cower from the social media. At other times, it's the other way around. Social media companies can be very vulnerable to legislation from government. So there's never a fixed, I don't think there's ever a fixed...
You think that's a naive way of thinking?
Well, obviously, I don't think my own way of thinking is naive.
Well, listen, I'm having this conversation with you because I'm curious to know how you process this part, because logically, none of this makes sense. Let me go back to when you're saying, do you believe there's such a thing as an establishment, a anti-establishment? Do you believe there's such a thing as, the groups of people of money and power behind closed doors that, are the puppet masters who feel they can control and influence elections, societies, countries, wars?
I think it's a low resolution way of thinking. Very low resolution.
Unpack that for me.
I think that, again, it comes down to the nature of the world being extremely complex always, much more complex in this era where we get insight into things we would never have got insight into before. The ability on our devices to find out information we would never have been allowed to find out before, and to hear opinions we could never have heard before. There is, in my view, a temptation. There are many temptations in this era, but one of them is to see specific guiding hands in certain places because it is a consolation to us to help us through what otherwise looks like something too close to chaos.
As you can see, they're kind of having a disagreement about definition or how things work. And many times I do agree with a take that PVD has, but in this case, I think he's being too simplistic. Even though he does have he's right to a certain extent that there's an establishment to companies. There's people that have been there for years. There's people that have influence that can control certain things or have a bigger say in many aspects of the world. But many times when people say the establishment, what they should be replacing is, I don't know. Something is happening and I don't know why this is happening. Therefore, I'm going to say it is the establishment. But because most time when you press people with questions about what is the establishment, not all the time, but many times, they give you explanations or they're like, oh, but I don't know. And you see that they don't really have a concrete idea of what the establishment is. And it is not necessarily because they're dumb. It is because humans want closure. Let's say something bad happens. And we know something bad happens, and then there's a moment where there's an investigation. There's people trying to actually get a real understanding of what's happening. And then the conspiracy comes along. The conspiracy starts saying, oh, this is happening because of George Soros or because of Bill Gates. And to a certain extent, although they do have definitely a lot of influence and they have certain ideas how they want to shape their world, not everything resolves by that. Because the more you start investigating any situation, the deeper you dig in, you notice it's a lot more complicated than that. And the big factor is that we're humans. I'll give you one example with the assassination attempt on Trump. Many people started believing that they were just trying to get Trump assassinated. Even though, yes, there's definitely a lot of room with the level of mistakes that happened during his that assassination attempt, for people to believe that it's reasonable that maybe people do want to see something bad happen to Trump. And that's unfortunate that people in this country, from either side, I think anyone that wants anything bad happen to Kamala or any politicians, I think you're too deep in to your tribe. And if you think about it for a second, that's exactly what Russia and China wants. That's exactly what they want. For you to hate your government so much that you're willing to cause a bigger problem, because a destabilized United States has to focus on internal issues. Therefore, China and Russia can do their things. But staying on topic, people, whenever they observe politics or they observe people on the real world, they don't think at the end those people are human. And what happens with humans? Have you ever not been in a work at your job doing something that you have done for years? And sometimes you make a really, really silly mistake, and you're like, how did I miss that? And the problem is you have become so used to nothing going wrong with the current process that you have, that you become complacent. You become lazy about the process that you're doing, and you don't think it's something bad is going to happen until it does. Especially in government, with this all DEI nonsense, forcing people into certain jobs that they shouldn't be. And this is something for definitely for a different debate. I think people should be at the job based on the merits of their skills, regardless of race, color, whatever, ethnicity, sex. It doesn't matter. If you have the skills and the attitude to do a certain job, you should be able to do it. But now, I don't think you should hire that person just because they fit a certain box. I think an application should be, I think probably to a certain extent you have to put male and female, but I don't think ethnicity should be in the playbooks in the process of hiring the person. So going back to what Douglas Murray is saying, many of those people, many times people just make mistakes. Many times people just really mess up, and those people that they think have so much power, so much influence, they don't have as much power as influence as you might think. Do they have a lot of influence? And significant more than you? Of course, if you're the millionaire in your small town, you're probably going to have a lot of influence. But there's always barriers that get in the way of you having that influence. And Douglas is trying to be, not necessarily, maybe he's definitely on a debate mode, but he's also comparing different scenarios where he actually has done investigation, where he has digged through the trenches to see exactly what's happening in that situation, and then he thinks, what was the approach that I had before I did this investigation? What is the understanding that I have after spending years trying to understand what happened here? And then he's like, this guy is trying to simplify something that is a lot more complex than he wants it to be. But I understand to the marketing or the media side, for PVD, it's easier to say the establishment because you get clicks. It's easier to get stuff out. You don't have to give that much details if you just say, hey, the establishment did this. Who is the establishment? Who are exactly the people that are involved in that situation? And as a process, as a way of thinking, although there is an establishment, I don't think the establishment has the power that people think it does. There's some people in different aspects, in different financial, there's people in government, but to a certain extent, at the end, it's more complicated than people want to give credit to, and it's easier for a human brain to want to aspire to conspiracy because you need closure. Your brain cannot just be in a mode that, hey, I just don't know, and my brain is just going to stay with something like a story halfway, and the human brain just wants to close it, and that's why many things we label the Illuminati, this weird people, or the frog people, whatever names people use to name in a specific group, which they have no understanding or limited understanding of all the moving parts, and therefore they're trying to simplify to convey a message. But I'll give you here the second part.
Word for it. I'll use it. Do some people who are the establishments who are using their tenure for being around and they know where the body's buried, can they sometimes make some decisions that they think is the right decision that end up destroying what they once built or what they once helped grow? can they negatively impact a society, a country, a company?
So as he was explaining there in that second part, it is similar to the take that I was initially planning to have. That I honestly got this concept from a different person that I saw an interview, and it definitely made a lot of sense how sometimes conspiracy doesn't become just because you like to believe in conspiracies. Just the problem, you have a lot of ideas or lack of understanding how certain things work, and you need to give closure. That way, those things just don't stay in the air, like uncertainty of not knowing what's going to happen or what could possibly happen, and this thing you made up in your head, that way you can be prepared for a potential future. So that's sort of the explanation, but I'll definitely go this time around with Douglas. I think he, in my opinion, he gave a better explanation of what the problem is and how many things are complicated and it's not as easy as people want to make it seem. And I will leave it as that.